Hey everyone, it's Maria. Before this week's episode starts, I just wanted to come on here and say a few things. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll probably see me looking at my phone the whole time, and that's obviously because I have everything written down on here, so I'll just be reading off of this. First and foremost, I pray for the safety and well-being for the family and friends of those who have passed because of hate crime. As an Asian American and the eldest daughter of immigrant parents, the events that occurred not just this past weekend in Atlanta, but throughout this past year have angered me, to say the least. As someone who has been the target of casual racist remarks growing up in white suburbia, and have family and friends be constant victims of racist remarks and outright attacks, it definitely takes a toll. As someone who takes pride in being part of the AAPI community, I ask everyone listening to amplify us. Amplify Asians, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islander voices and causes. Listen to us and don't disregard our struggles, because they are real and they are valid. Furthermore, hold yourself and the people around you accountable. The fight for equality and equity and the fight to be truly anti-racist is a constant fight, but a fight worth being exhausted over. Please don't make it a switch you turn on and off at your convenience. And this part goes out to the white folks. Don't separate yourselves from the quote-unquote bad white people. If you're an ally, help educate those bad white people, because if you're not, you're leaving it up to the Black, Indigenous, and people of color to do your job. Again. And that's a form of white privilege. You're a white person. Use your privilege to help us end racism. I'll leave you with one last thing. I saw something on TikTok from one of the Stop Asian Hate rallies, and I want to put my own interpretation out there. Mabuhay in Tagalog is a greeting. Doesn't really translate to the word hello, but is the closest thing to the word hello that we have. I've never really thought about it this way, but if you take apart the word, you have the word ma, which is kind of like the word two. And then you have the word buhay, or buhay, which translates to alive or life, respectively. So, to all of you that have listened to me the past couple minutes now, I say mabuhay, or go out and live your life. Until next week, enjoy the episode.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Beamware podcast. I am Brittany, and today, even though we don't have Maria, you guys are going to hear a little from Maria, probably prior to even what you're listening to right now. She's probably spoken to you already about why she's not here, which is we're in support of that. But even though we don't have Maria, we do have an amazing guest coming on today named I don't know. Do I call you Andrew now? Should I call you Andrew?
You can call me whatever you like. Professionally, it's Andrew.
All right. Well, I'm going to go by Andrew. But because I've known you for a decade now, pretty much, I know him as Andy. But we'll keep it professional today. This is joining me today. We have Andrew Kavanagh. So, Andrew, we're super excited to have you because the whole time we were talking about music, all I could think about was you in the back of my mind because I know, not really in depth, but I know a lot of like the surface of what you do with music. And in the time that I've known you through, being with Dan, I've always encountered you in some type of situation with music. I've always heard a story from Dan about you guys and doing something related to music. So I'm very excited to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I was super pumped when you guys reached out.
Yay.
It was unexpected.
Good. I like unexpected things. It's been a while since I've seen you in person, so this is nice anyway.
Yeah. Over a year probably now.
Yeah, I think.
With COVID, it was probably in D.C. That weekend. And that's definitely over a year. That wasn't last summer. That was 2 summers ago now. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, time is flying. I know you're not even in the same place that you used to live, right?
No. I've been changing states like I changed my pants. It's been a wild decade, but I'm up in Massachusetts now. Actually, pretty far up too. I'm bordering New Hampshire at this point.
Oh wow!
So I'm pretty far
up
there, about 500 miles from where we were.
Oh my goodness!
Yep. I'm living with my sister and brother-in-law and their 1-year-old son, which was the whole reason I actually moved up.
Yeah, I know that you have a very, very special relationship with your nephew. It's a beautiful thing. I can relate, having 2 myself. And we can get into all of that later. But first, I wanted to dive into, this is going to be a learning experience for me too, because I'm not all too familiar with what you do. Like I know that you work within music and within therapy, and I've seen so much of your work that you share on social media, and kind of we've had conversations, very brief, about like the experiences you've had with clients and music and things like that. But
Sure.
I think what you do is very powerful, especially after the conversations Maria and I have been having the last couple of episodes. So give us a little info. What is it you do for work? How did you get into it? And like, I know you have a new thing that you're working on right now. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
I do. So I will preface this. I rant and I ramble. And those topics of what do I do and how did I get here are like particularly rantable and rambleable.
Got it.
So stop me at any point if
No
I'm going
worries.
too
I do
far
the same
off
thing
base.
with my work.
But
you're good.
yeah, it's, you know, if you care about it, you just start going.
Very true.
But what I do is I'm a music therapist. I've been practicing for just about a decade now. And as we were saying, I've been all up and down the East Coast, moving every couple years. And so that's given me a really eclectic view of the field and different areas that I can work in, and all sorts of different experiences. What I'm currently doing is when I moved up to Massachusetts about 3 months ago, right around Christmas time. And at that point, I had left the company that I was with in Virginia, which are awesome, Capital Music Therapy Services. If you're down there, go check them out, Fairfax, Virginia. But I made the decision to come up north and start my own music company so I could be closer to my family and my nephew as he's growing up. And so in the last couple months, it's been a lot of, planting the seeds and beginning the Kavanagh Music Company. We've got a website coming. I've got a website coming out in soon. It's a few last touches. Kavanagh Music Company. We do music therapy, music lessons, and then entertainment. Like acoustic things. I play like weddings and bars and parties and things like that. Obviously, COVID is putting a damper on a lot of that in-person and physical stuff, but there are still ways around it, and you can make it happen. But the big question, I know anyone that is listening and heard any of that small ramble, is what the heck is music therapy? Are you just a dirty hippie? Is usually what's in most people's minds. And they don't want to say it, but that's what's coming to mind. So I prepared exactly for this and got the AMTA, the American Music Therapy Association's exact definition of what music therapy is, and then we can talk about what that actually means. Musictherapy.org is where it's coming from, very easy to remember, but that is the American Music Therapy Association, pretty much the guru on music therapy right now, at least in the States. And they define music therapy as the clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship by a credentialed professional who has completed an approved music therapy program. What does that textbook jargon mean is usually the next question that comes.
Yes, always.
So I find it's easier to grasp when I give actual experience, anecdotes and things like that. My last job and what I'm trying to cultivate right now with the Kavanagh Music Company is a very wide spectrum. I like to work with a lot of different clients. I've worked with beginning of life, like 15, 18-month-year-olds, to end of life 103-year-olds, everyone in between. If you open up the DSM and go look at a diagnosis and just like pick one at random, I've probably worked with a client who has had that diagnosis or feels they're struggling with something similar. And so it's been a very broad spectrum of practice for me, but the end game is we use music as a medium for reaching certain goals that a patient or a client is looking to attain. So what that means is someone has a child with autism. That's one of my most frequent scenarios that I encounter in this work. Someone has a child with autism. They're struggling to engage in other therapies or in schoolwork or any kind of other extracurriculars, but they respond so well to music, they just absolutely love it. And they'll, according to a parent, obviously each kid's going to be different, but we'll take kid A, for example. He loves music. And so he comes to me, and mom and dad are like, he's not talking, he's not communicating, he's like, just laundry list of things they would like to see him doing better or the client doing better. And so as a music therapist, what we do is we assess those needs. We take what the parent or the client, if they're able to tell us, what their needs are, what their goals are, where they want to go. And our job is to fill in the space between with interventions, activities, discussions, all relevant to that, but music based. And I always reference it as being like the happy uncle that shows up for the birthday party, plays songs with the guitar, and then like bounces out, and then they work on whatever, clapping happy song, and then we come back, we do it again, and everyone's super happy. It's that on a base level is kind of what we're doing. We make it fun so they have no idea whether they're 18 months or 103. That person has no idea they're working on a skill set or learning new things. It's just fun and enjoyable because we're using something that makes it fun and enjoyable.
Awesome.
That's a very base, like primitive version of explaining what we do, but that is also my end goal in all of this is if you're not enjoying it, you're not really fulfilling what you came to me for. If it's a drag and you're hating it and it's just you don't want to go, no one's going to make progress in that world and in that frame of mind. So a big part of what we do is we make the crappy parts of like talk therapy and like hashing out really heavy things, if we're talking about like mental health and things like that, like dealing with those things, or learning how to communicate, learning how to do daily tasks, learning how to do fine and gross motor skills. All these things are like super daunting and hard to do when you're doing like PT or OT or just regular therapies, or even just growing and becoming a person. So what we do is we take all those learning experiences and find unique ways to incorporate music into it. So what that might look like for a child with autism is a session where we have instruments around the room and certain, we call them interventions, certain interventions that would say this child is not communicating. They're not verbal. So we would do experiences and interventions that provide opportunity for them to fill in the blank or actually start using words, even if it's syllables and utterances. It's eliciting responses at the very beginning. And so we would do, even with little kids, if you did like Old MacDonald or something and you just leave a blank, like Old MacDonald had a, they fill in the blank. And in this way, they're not necessarily being like, oh, I'm learning to like call and respond and listen to something and think about it and actually articulate it afterwards. It's just this process of, this is fun. I want the response because this makes me go, haha, yeah. And
right.
So,
and it's a sense of like accomplishing something too, right? And finishing it.
Exactly. And that sense of accomplishment needs to be small increments, because if you shoot for the moon, anyone that shoots for the moon, like obviously you need to know where the moon is. You need to be able to see the moon and recognize, all right, I got to get there.
Right, which is
but
exactly what you're talking about with
moon,
goals, right? Like having a goal and knowing where you're moving on.
Yeah, my old boss used to say, eat the elephant one bite at a time. And I fully ascribe to that. Even my own life now, like, all right, something's overwhelming and I feel like I can't get it done. What's step one? What do we do right now to get something done on this? And so with clients of any type, and any kind of person, typically functioning depression, anxiety, autism, schizophrenia, anybody under the sun, it comes down to what can we achieve right now that is going to benefit you and help you reach the moon that you're looking at, that goal that's far off.
That's beautiful. And I think it's like I've been writing it down a lot of notes, so I'm going to ask you a bajillion follow-up questions or like bring up a little anecdote. I I think it's amazing, and I'm thinking about this in the parallels to everything that you're explaining, and the way that you utilize music is very much how I work with movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's such a, I had mentioned this in one of our previous episodes this month, that there is this innate connection that we as humans have to music. I think it's the same thing as the connection we have to movement. It's something that just exists in us. And I am so interested and super curious about learning more about like how all of these like therapies work with music. And what you're saying, you're saying so much, it becomes a form of communication. It becomes a form of self understanding and self development. And I see, like, now I know how we use those different things in like movement form. So now, like, I wonder what they do in music. So this might be a follow up thing that we have to talk about, because I'm very interested.
Definitely.
But
a lot of crossover for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me. I'm also thinking a lot about my father right now. So, like, you know a little bit of what's going on with my dad, but I haven't super dove into everything with my listeners. But with what's going on with my father, through all of his health issues right now, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder, my father is big on music. My father is the reason why I have the passion that I have for music. So I'm thinking to myself, I wonder how he would respond to having like these little interventions set up to help him like cope with what he's going, even just like cope like that. It's traumatic to go through a major health crisis.
Yeah,
so I'm thinking about it in that realm. And I love how you're saying how you work with people of all ages, because music can be a form of therapy for you for anything that you're going through. And especially, I love that you brought up cases of having any type of client who has autism, because I feel like I've heard so many stories about musical prodigies who end up being on the spectrum because that's their thing. Like, that's the mode of communication that works for them when maybe linguistics doesn't feel as comfortable. And that's, I think, something that we kind of almost take for granted, how complicated it actually is for us to be able to do the amazing thing, which is have a conversation or communicate with our voices. Even if we can't, and like formulating a word and then like learning different languages, it's really complicated. But music has this constant, it has a consistency, right? Like, when you play a note, that note from every instrument is going to be like more or less consistent, right? It's still going to be the same note. And having a baseline,
that frequency is never not going to be that frequency,
right?
Like the vibration in the wavelength that you hear when you hear an A note, that's gonna be an A, and that's an A. And we don't think about it, and we don't really know it innately. But you guys were talking a little bit about this in the episode I was listening to this morning, that internal rhythm and like I think you called it like the band inside you, like the heart beats the drum, and then like everything going through you is like the melody and things like that. And super intuitive and very accurate. Everything in life is based on vibrations. Literally, the sound we're making, the movements we make, our existence in space is all just vibrations. And there are certain frequencies and vibrations that literally help and heal. People often refer to it, this example, like a cat's purr. I forget what the actual range is that's in, but like that has scientifically been proved to reduce stress and lower blood pressure, and like just have all of these, like a cat sitting on you, but you have health benefits now. Okay, but it has backing, and everything comes down to that same thing. Even the preferred sounds you like, it's what's resonating and what you're able to pick up on and feel from.
Yeah, it's almost like you are your own individual tuning fork. And it's like whatever vibrations hit you or what you. It's so funny that you brought up. So I know that you have cats, and we can totally talk into cat ownership as well. But it's so funny that you brought up cats, because there have been intermittent times in the last couple of months where I've been staying with my mother, so I haven't been home, and I always wondered to myself, I definitely noticed a difference in my ability to like manage stress, or my starting to notice that I really miss my cats. And like there are a bunch of reasons to miss your cats,
Sure,
but I
yeah.
was like, there's something that feels different in my mood when I come home and I spend time with my cats. And what you're talking about in terms of the like that vibration and their response and what they it's funny because people don't understand cats, but and like people are
That's a
always
whole
very
nother talk.
yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. And they don't see like what the benefit of having a cat is. But now we're talking like, hey, this is a like support. They're a support animal. They're an emotional support animal, and being able to offer something like that to you, if you take the time to tune your awareness, or like tune your musical tuning fork, your internal fork, you'll start to notice how like everything you have is related to those vibrations. And I think that we're getting into now like a form of science that's east meets west, that's a little bit more underground right now. Like we talk about, I know, like I'm thinking about like all of the yoga practices that I've learned about and how vibrations relate, and then I'm also thinking about, I don't know, have you watched the new WandaVision show, the Scarlet Witch show?
No, it's on my list. I want to check it out because I love all the things Marvel's done so far.
We do too. Dan and I are huge
I just
Marvel
haven't had a
nerds.
moment.
But it's also resonating on my mind this way because when we think about like the magical and the mythical, that stuff even becomes possible because you're still talking about you're intervening on those vibrations, right? You're controlling those vibrations. And it's a very, I know Maria and I had talked about this on multiple episodes too. It's a very simple thing when you look at it, but we have the ability to play with those vibrations by playing instruments
And movement, which was
right.
the beginning of this before the tangent.
Very true, yes. And movement and music. So having what you're saying too in terms of like that building confidence and that helping people. Therapy is really about helping people build a foundation to be able to live their life on. That's therapy, right?
Yes.
Those coping mechanisms when things feel, and I'm speaking as like an anxiety and depression person myself, when things feel overwhelming, therapy helps you find like a ground to stand on and gives you like coping mechanisms and better ways to communicate if that's something that you need to work on, and seeing it through
that rug's been pulled out and you can stand back up.
Right. Seeing it's really, I'm enjoying this on a lot of different levels. Being able to see how music is able to help you kind of reconnect to that foundation and then find another way to move forward, find another way to, manage coping and interacting with the world and yourself in a better way is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's funny you use the words like returning to. Now I already forget what word it used, but returning to like that state of being able to do that it's such a hang up for anyone that's like past childhood, because for whatever reason in the Western world we beat people into these boxes and then say go out and do this, and the creativity and the willingness to just go for something. Like, how many adults do you know, if you're just like, sing me something, let's sing, they're all going to be like, no, I'm not singing in front of these people. And it's this fear of just like doing the literally one of the most primal things that humans and animals and even trees and wind do. You create sound and you exist. And people are so afraid of doing those kinds of things. And that's a huge part of what we do when we're working with anyone that's, teenager and older. Some kids have difficulty with it. Obviously, everyone's different. But so many people that once you hit like middle school, you're like, oh, nope, I got to shut up about everything. I got to be cool now. And it's the act of just making sound is so relieving.
The psychosocial, right, like influence that we have is and it's a lot of it 100%. Happens under the radar.
It's not even thought about. It's not purposeful either. Well, who knows? But we'll save conspiracies for later.
It's easier, right? It's much easier. it's very funny because Dan and I were just having a conversation in a business meeting a couple of days ago about the idea of being a part of a collective. And like the potential, we were looking at it from both sides, right? We were talking about the positive part of being a part of a collective, right? Everybody's connected. No one feels isolated. You have like this hive of communication, right? If you look like, and speaking of hive, like if you look at bees, right, they're super freaking efficient. Like they have a whole, they're very conformed, right? They all do their jobs.
Everyone
they all
knows exactly what they have to do.
Right. But at the same time, like bees don't have the, like,
bees don't make art.
Right. Bees don't have the ability to do that. And that's the simplest way to put it, right? Bees don't have the ability to do anything other than that, right? They have their schemas, their entire brain function is very much meant for that. Then you take, a human being and the complications of the emotions that we're able to manage and feel and work through to create all of that art. There's a fine line of the benefits of where being a part of a collective is versus like ripping out that uniqueness. You hit the nail on the head in that it starts in middle school, because that's the age range that I start working with, especially in musicals. And
we start getting the kids labeling each other too, and putting them in like these niches of like, you play sports, you play music, you like math, you like rocks or something. I don't know.
And it's a weird it's a weird thing too, because I still don't quite understand. I think it's a balance of being able to kind of understand your surroundings while they're literally grasping at straws, because so much is happening to them, like emotionally during that time.
Such a tumultuous point.
Right.
Yeah.
They need something to hold on to, but it's something that once you get out of, like, the environments of middle school and high school are really their own worlds. Once you get out of those, you have the ability to break out of all those boxes. And then of course society tries to put you in like a different box, like you were bringing up. But we really do it. Like what you said, it comes back to having the ability to have the awareness of that, and that's something we talk about on this show so much, because that's been a big part of both Maria and I's personal journeys on a lot of different ways. But you can't, if you so want to, choose to do something about it, and it's not that everybody does. Some people are very happy in their box.
Right.
You can't take any steps forward, right? What you were talking about with your moon analogy, you're not getting there unless you first assess the situation, right? Even having a goal and working towards goals, like there's, unrealistic goal setting, which just makes you, leads you to ending up in music theory because you're dealing with depression and anxiety. But the ability to have awareness of where you are is always the first step in moving forward or doing anything that's going to be productive to you moving out of that box. That was a big.
I call it a practice in being present.
That's beautiful.
You need to be here and now, and realizing your responses and your thinking, and that is going to change in 10 minutes. That, like, we are constantly fluctuating. And so it's coming, like you just said, full circle, coming back to something you said like 15 minutes ago. It does all come back to that idea of management, of like figuring yourself out, of being like, well, why am I ticked off? What do I have? Like, why have I not let that go? It was like, I lost sleep over something 5 years ago. Okay, I should just go to sleep and forget about it. That's not easy.
Right.
Like, easier
said than done. And it's hard because I've become such a cognitive I've become such a nerd about the way our brain works. Because that's like,
have you delved into CBT at all?
Cognitive behavioral?
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, it seems like up your alley.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I, wanted to dive into all of it more. Because everything that we're talking about, right, all of our desire to have awareness and our ability to feel emotions, like, to our brain, that is the scariest thing in the world, because and that's exactly how we can fall into, being in that black and white, being in that collective, is because our brain wants that. Our brain is the closest thing that we have to like a robot in our entire system. It functions in a very specific way. Its mechanics are developed for us to stay safe.
It's its goal is to efficiently keep this thing going.
Exactly. And there's so much that we don't. What movie was that came out that was about the woman who, like, we only are able to control 10% of our, like, cognitive ability, but this woman went a little bit further. It's got Scarlett Johansson in it. I can't think of the name of the movie. But
I don't know.
The point that it drives is that fact, right? That we really don't know a lot about our brains still, right? Yeah. And the neurological field is still uncovering it, but it changes from day to day. We have so much more that we have to understand, especially the way that we process emotions. And, like, a lot of the time it's easier. We talk about, like, the going through anger and denial when it comes to, like, dealing with things, and that those grieving stages, those are all the defenses that are set up for our brain to protect us. Yeah. And we don't have to go through all of that, but if we stay in autopilot, if we stay inside the, you know, the nicely shaped box that our brain has designed and society has designed for us to stay safe, then we don't have to deal with any of it.
Yeah. And I think to that point, like, bringing it back to, like, the core of the human brain and what we've done for centuries before we got civilized and made these wonderful utopias we have now. It was fight or flight. That's still ingrained in here. And so when we have these feelings of heightened stress or anxiety or anger, the lizard brain takes over deep inside, and it's fight or flight. Are we going to throw punches, or are we going to run away and hide? Which one's going to benefit us most right now? And when there is no physical thing to go for or fight, the only option left is flight. And often with the mental end of it, that it's a flight inwards. And I'm king of this. I am, like, I'm Luke Skywalker on this stinking recluse island full of weird little animals and stuff that he gets milk from. Like, I love just me time, no one else. Like, and I'm very aware that part of that is a defense mechanism. Like, if things are stressful, all I want to do is be alone, like, in the woods. I'm just going to go walk, no one else, and that's it. And that is helpful at times, as long as you're not overdoing it and not Luke Skywalkering it and just, like, shirking everything else to be in that hole. But I think that's where you were saying it's, like, very natural to just defense, because that's what our brains are programmed to do. And a lot of therapy, be it movement, music, anything else, art, any therapy at all, is really breaking that mold and teaching you how to better cope so that you're not just withdrawing or you're not lashing out. And there's those two extremes aren't being met. You need to find a middle ground and a healthy way to do all of these things. And
so I'm very curious to know what that looks like in music therapy.
So this is a broad statement, but every single client looks extremely different in what that will entail. So we had mentioned, like, depression and anxiety a little earlier. So for someone like that, I've particularly, I spent a couple years working in an inpatient psychiatric hospital and then an outpatient setting. And now those scenarios and the situations those folks were dealing with are, you know, a little more to a lot more intense than your average day-to-day person that is struggling with anxiety and depression, but it's so subtle and so quiet that many people don't even know how bad it's getting. So seeing that continuum is very eye-opening. But when you're working with anyone in that regard, it's funny. It's actually something I wrote down to one of your questions that you sent earlier about, like, things I've learned and worked on through the years. It's the same as a lot of my clients. It is about, one, that awareness that you were talking about earlier. So being able to acknowledge this response or what I'm doing now is probably not best. That is not easy, and lots of times someone needs to call you out, and you're going to be very angry at them, and there's going to be a lot of headbutting, but that is growth. That is human existence, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There are better ways to do it, but
Yes.
at the same time, it is what we do in music therapy specifically, or I should say I do in music therapy specifically. I'm sure everyone has their own approach. But when I have cases like that and folks that are they most likely have never done this kind of therapy, if therapy at all, sometimes when they've come to see me. And so it's building a relationship first, and it is cultivating that experience with another person where they feel safe that they can tell me stuff. Whatever that stuff is up to them. And that is the extent of the therapy that they will receive, is what they're willing to give me. But in wanting to give them the best services I possibly can, it is 100% all a building process on a relationship. You are learning to trust me. You're learning about me. A lot of people in my field don't give a lot of personal information, which is wise in a lot of scenarios. And I pick and choose who knows what about my life, but I often like to use examples about myself because it helps level the playing field when talking with someone who is struggling with whatever it is, be it depression and anxiety, substance abuse, mental health of any sort, dealing with whatever it is in your life. If you're able to meet them somewhere and make them comfortable and have a conversation, that is knocking down the first wall.
What I was thinking about and what you were saying, um, that's one of the good ways that we can utilize that ability to want to be a part of something, to be connected to, like, to be the same, to be a part of that.
Yes.
I'm just going to use the collective because that's just the easiest way to come back to it now,
Yeah.
because I've touched on it before, right? When you have the ability to make someone realize that they're not alone, that especially when it comes to the
Yeah.
scary stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
That's where you're going to create
Stuff
that
no
safe
one wants to
space.
talk about.
Yeah, and we all go through. So the reality of it is, like, we're all just, hurting ourselves in the end by not talking about it. But that's what you were talking about, creating those safe spaces and sharing, like, in your personal experiences to help them feel more
Yes.
comfortable.
And that's where you can truly start to process too, because you're being honest and you're being real. Again, something you had sent in the earlier questions is like things that I value in life,
Yeah.
and like authenticity is number one. Like if you are not real, I've got no freaking time in my day to be listening to what you have to say, because what's the point? It's a
Yeah.
bunch of BS. If you're giving me the runaround, if you're like, whatever, be honest, be straightforward with me. And you see it all the time with clients as a defense mechanism, because
Right.
no one wants to talk about the hard crap
Right.
until you're comfortable talking about the hard crap. And one of the benefits and the happy uncle aspects of music therapy is you can break down that wall much quicker than just like sitting across the room and being like, so how do you feel today?
Yeah.
1 to 10. Like, we can do it in a fun way and an engaging way and a creative way. Like if someone is dealing with depression and anxiety and they're coming to me for help, it's an endless amount. Endless as long as, how can I phrase this? Your creativity is the limit to the amount of interventions and experiences you can create with someone, which is one of the most fun things about music therapy, is that it is always a new creation on your end of building and catering to your client. So someone comes to me with depression and anxiety, say they're a teenager or something. I'll use an anonymous example from one of my past clients. I saw them for about a year and a half, and we spent a lot of time. There's a lot of family things going on, a lot of sibling stuff happening, and they were just having a very rough time of it, and they're pretty young. They were below teenage years, and even at that level, we were able to build a relationship that started off talking about chips, literally. First session, we talked about chips and what he likes to eat. 40 minutes. Other things happened as well, but that's kind of the gist of it. We built that relationship. Next time he came in spewing all sorts of random real life stuff at me. And as the relationship built over couple sessions, it became very easy for him just to walk in and be like, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, and I got really mad and did this, and that probably wasn't good. And so the processing already starts once you're able to open up the dialogue and have them talk it out. But on top of that, what we're doing besides the actual talk therapy is I would do experiences with like picking a piece of paper out of a hat that has an emotion on it, and you don't tell me what the emotion is. You have to play it on a drum and express that emotion to me in a way that I'm going to be able to understand and guess it. And so what they're forced to do at that point is look inward and see, how do I think this emotion is when I'm putting it out there into the world, and what conveys that, and actually dissecting that feeling, so they're more aware of when that feeling comes back. They're like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't react like smacking the drum at 400 BPM and like throwing it.
Yeah.
Because we're angry. Like, so it's building that understanding, but then also to go further with it, we started making songs, and we started doing more of that kind of creative expression. So there's like a lot of it I base off improv at the beginning, just because people are scared of improv, but it's a little easier sometimes just to get them going if you're just like doing things. If you just start doing something and there's no other option but to sit there and stare at you or engage and have fun, eventually someone's probably going to engage and have fun, as long as you're trying to like poke and prod.
Yeah, and as long as like that safe space has been established prior to, right?
Yes.
They're more likely to
day
engage.
One, no, don't poke the bear.
No, and this is,
but it is all about
rules
that.
It's the same rules for movement. It literally is the same rules,
Yeah.
and it's in not even taking it outside of, the artistic, I guess, the artistic forms. It is a basic for people, right? To be that's a learning situation. Like, first and foremost, like, that's the biggest thing I think about all modalities of therapies or any modality of art. You're learning, whether it's about yourself, about your environment. You're doing a lot of learning, which is exactly what like kind of puts us in that vulnerable state, is because we have to be, first of all, we're willingly walking in there saying, I don't know what I'm doing, like, I need help to do this, right? We have the ability to use all of these different things, but when we're in a learning situation first, and this is the educator and me being a nerd right now, the first thing they teach you about being an educator is that you need to create a safe space.
Yeah.
Right. And it's something that Dan and I have seen a lot in the last like year and a half, because we've been working a lot on personal development and self-development and self-awareness. And we've both seen that, like, we haven't necessarily in life been in a lot of environments that cultivate that, because they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not able to share those things.
It's supposed to be very sterile.
Right. Exactly. So it's like really awkward to go through all of that, but it's very interesting to be able to put it into the perspective of, it's very interesting to be able to put it into the perspective of education and seeing how, you're second by second, you're learning in those very vulnerable places in therapy. And you're usually there because you have to learn something about yourself, which is more uncomfortable, and tells your brain like, no, don't do that. We're good. So, I mean, I'm thinking to myself too, of all of the, so like, Dan plays music by improving. That's like straight up what he does. I don't think he knows notes. I don't think he he's like done sheet music and stuff, and he had to do all of that when he played the saxophone. But like now when he plays like any of his guitars, he doesn't play and read. He literally just sits there and is like, and like,
it just makes sound.
Right. And like, and based on what you're saying, and like, he definitely uses it as a form of like his own therapy, like that, hands down, 100%. But it's beautiful to be able to put things into that perspective, to see it as that. And now I can like appreciate the fact that Dan does that more. But being able to allow a teenager,
I would assume you do from movement.
Yeah.
It's still expression. It's my best friend since I was in diapers graduated from Elon in Carolina for as a dance performance major. and his brother was into dance, his dad was into dance, and so I've been around like movement-based folks my whole life, and it all is it's the same in my mind as musical expression, especially if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Like Dan sitting down and playing his guitar or piano or anything he has to just play it and not really thinking. That is like my number one go-to of like I'm going to feel better after this. And it's the same idea as movement, as like it's all connected, like you said at the very beginning. The movement, the sound, like all that is the inherent human experience, and dates back to as far as like we know about humans. They have had song and dance, be it spiritual or religious or ceremonial, or just some of them like to party sometimes and dance and make sounds. Like every ethnicity, every area of the world, every culture ever in music is ingrained in them. There is not one that doesn't make sound and movement coexist as some form of rejoice or ritual or community, and bringing it all together. You to say bring it to what you were saying earlier about being a part of the collective. That creates the collective in the moment. You are a part of it, whether you're moving, whether you're making sound, whether you're just watching and clapping and enjoying, if you're singing along, like you are a part of something in that time. And with COVID, this has not been possible in the last year, but a big part of what I used to do too was group sessions, not just one-on-ones, where you do get to experience that. And while I can't dance worth a crap. My moves are like the what's it from Hitch, which is like home base.
Wow, that's such a good movie.
Like that's all I got. But when moving with music, I don't care about how it looks or what I do, and it ends up being this like weird, flappy armed, enjoyable thing for me that looks terrible. But when I do it with clients, and like I used to work a lot with kids groups and older adults groups, particularly I'd go to like older adults homes and do live groups with them and bring a bunch of instruments and play songs live, play songs recorded, and have them like play drums, sing, movement. We had scarves and all sorts of stuff. But it really is about making it a whole body experience, and those vibrations and the movements and the sound all work together to heal. Like think about people at a wedding. Like if everyone just sat at the wedding and was like, this chicken's good. No one's like, yeah, they might enjoy the food, but that's not that fun. Everyone's out there dancing and singing to like their favorite songs and having a good time. That creates such a different experience. And that's what people are afraid of still. And so breaking down that barrier and getting people to that point of being open to it allows them to then experience these vulnerabilities like you were talking about, and putting themselves out there and putting themselves in a situation where they have to learn quick, and they have to make decisions. And that shows someone a lot about themselves, as long as you are then able to process what happened afterwards. And that is the therapy. The therapy is the process, not necessarily what we're actually doing in those moments, but the moments after, where we're like, yeah, jam, we made this. And though I, as the clinician, have a goal in mind and am steering it towards that goal and know what's going on, the client is more experiencing this relief and this communal aspect and all of these connections that they otherwise wouldn't. So then when it's done, your job is only just beginning as a clinician and as a therapist. That's where the real work on your end starts, to start asking the questions that make them think through what happened. Why we wrote this song and we chose these instruments and we made it this way. Let's take it bit by bit. Why did you write this line? What do you think this is about? You improv'd it. You just made it up on the spot. It came out of your brain, and we put it on paper. Why do you think you thought of that? And go from there and start building that and understanding yourself through a like retroactive analysis of your own work. And I find it helps people a lot. It's something that helps me a lot. And when I write my own music, I don't think at all, ever. I just go and create, much like when Dan's just jamming. I'll just go and make something. And then I come back to it later and I look at it and digest it. And I'm like, was that what I was thinking about? Why am I thinking about that?
And that's the hardest part of being in that artistic process, is you have to deal with yourself.
Yeah.
When you do all
it's the mirror. You're putting the mirror up to yourself immediately, which is scary.
It is. It's very uncomfortable. It's funny what you're bringing up about. I want to like touch on a couple things. I want to go backwards and I want to go forwards a little bit, but it must be very, very. I know that I have a hard time when it comes to movement, of me over analyzing it because I'm so used to being in that spot, right? And then me just kind of taking it for what it is and enjoying it. Do you find that you do that? You have to like control that for yourself with music too?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not it's like one of those things where it's like, you know, knowledge is responsibility at that point. Like you have to be super responsible for the abilities that you have when, you know, because Maria would love to talk about this. I know, because she loves music theory and all of that. But I want to go back to two things that you touched on. It's so funny that you brought up movement and like the concerns for what it looks like, because that's what's so frustrating about it, right? Is like when it comes to music, right? The end result is worrying about what it sounds like, right? Not necessarily like the process of what you're going through as it's being developed. When art is literally created for a process, not for a product, but not, you know, put it in our society and then it's all about the product. Movement is very much in the same way. And it's funny because I remember, you know, I grew up doing very, you know, codified dance technique, like your body has to look like this. It has to look like this. It has to look like this. And then when I started studying it in conservatory, I'll never forget, we were doing an improvisation, right? And we were just moving. My natural, grew up like ballet trained, very specific, but my natural feelings of the way I want to move are very, I got a critique once that it was like disturbing to watch me do improvisation, because
I need an example. I need to see this at some point.
Like I like to make movement very contorted, like very, which I mean like makes a lot of sense for my mental state at the time.
Sure.
But I like when movement is very complicated and almost unsettling to watch. Like, you know how when you watch like a scary movie and like the creepy thing like crawls at you, right? Like
what was it? The everyone from Silent Hill, pretty much.
Yeah, like those things. Like I don't watch scary movies, but I know those things. Like I like the feeling of doing those things,
the discomfort,
of moving in those ways. I'm also like very hypermobile, so I have the ability to do that. But like I love that uncomfortable, because if you think about it, right, on a daily basis, and this is kind of a little sidetracking, but this is what I work with when I work with movement as a therapy. We spend our day very much rigid and regimented. So like it's actually really healing for the body to go through all of those different like capacities of movement, all those different ranges of motion and all of that stuff within a healthy boundary. So it's funny to me when like it doesn't matter what it looks like. Like that's what I have to remind people all the time, and it kind of speaks to the bigger topic that we're talking about too, right? It doesn't matter what it sounds like. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters what you're feeling inside you. Like it's that looking at it intrinsically and not worrying about the outer scope of it. And then this kind of circles into the next thing you talked about, like your use of scarves and creating that creative play to kind of interact with music and start to understand, right, what's going on around you. That's exactly how I work with kids with movement too. Yeah. We bring in other things. We let them just listen to something and respond to it. It's very fun to watch. We definitely need to do it as we're older more, but that playing field of the way that kids interact with music and movement as a child, right, is very similar. It's all about that big word that you brought up before, which is a play, right? That fun that you're creating. I can like picture me working
enjoyable, so we're doing it.
Yeah, and just watching them. This is a side note for anybody who works with children, or even, and I'm sure you see this with your nephew. This is one of my favorite reasons to be around my nephews. Just watching them enjoy an experimental experience with music and movement it's the greatest thing to you almost live vicariously through them, because especially when we're an adult, because it gets literally stripped from you in so many ways. You're told, like we said before, you're not able to do it.
If I went to one of your classes, I'd be stiff as a board, like, crap, why did I do this? I'm uncomfortable already. Like,
right, it's super normal.
And I'm preaching that we shouldn't do that.
Right, so. Right. Oh yeah, I totally get it. I'm that person who. It's funny. I was in a rehearsal the other day, and my high school. When you work with like high school enthusiastic about musical kids, it's like a wonderful thing. I was in one of my rehearsals, and the kids like to lead themselves through like a physical warm up, and I'm gung ho for that. And I got on stage to do it with them, and in my brain, right, all of the years of doing this, all the years of movement, I was like, I want to feel ridiculous doing this. And I was like, for a second, I literally had to stop. I was like, what is going on right now? Are you really, did you really just say that?
I'm going to feel ridiculous.
Right.
All therapy. Forever.
It was so, right, that's very true. But I was like, Brittany, you're usually the person who's leading. I was like, what is, and I think it also has a little bit to do the disassociation of having not been in group settings for the past year, right, with COVID.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor.
But it was so funny, and one of my kids was watching me have this internal dialogue, because I don't hide things that I'm feeling or thinking very well. They show up on my face usually and in my body. So one of my kids was watching me sit there, and I don't know I can't imagine what I must have looked like, but she looked at me and she was like, "Are you okay, Miss Cohen? What's happening right now?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine.
Just having a mental crisis. Don't worry."
Right. And it was just so weird because, and then it was the whole time we're moving, I'm like, why were you thinking like that? You cannot do this to these kids and give them or make them think that you're worried about. It was so funny. But we have those. It comes back to what you were talking about too. Practice being present, right? And that was a moment of that, right? But it's the practice part. And it's not and Marie and I have mentioned this with therapy too. It's not you go to therapy and you practice it for that year that you're there, however long you're there. It's you are practicing this the rest of your life,
right.
Constantly.
Your therapy may stop,
right?
And in all reality, the therapist should hope that you don't need them anymore, despite the lack of job security that creates. They should want you out, using what skills they've learned from you to make their life what they want it.
Right.
And taking those skills, whatever they may be, to live as well as they can.
Yeah.
That should be the ultimate goal of all therapy, is to not be there ever again and know all you need to do.
Yeah. I love that. That's such a good point. So now, okay, I want to kind of circle back. So you've known Dan for forever and ever, and all of the many stories that I've heard regarding you were always, aside from, mischievous moments, had a lot to do with music. So was there something that happened in your life? How did you get to being in this place and doing the work that you're doing? Was there something that was relevant to your life? Was it just you knew you explored it and you stumbled upon it?
That's a long-winded explanation.
Always, I get it.
Yes. But, music's always been around. My household wasn't particularly musical in that, my mom knows how to play the violin, but didn't really play it, during my upbringing and my sister's upbringing. We had it at the house, and, I'd make terrible sounds with it every once in a while just to play with it. We had my grandmother's violin, but we also had a stand-up piano in the house. My sister learned the piano growing up and the flute, and come third grade, I had started learning the saxophone in the school band and taking group lessons in elementary school. Before that, it was really my parents were always listening to music. There's a lot of Beatles, John Denver, Jackson 5, Bruce Springsteen, just all that stuff. So it was always present, and everyone always liked music, but it wasn't an active thing. And so once I hit that point in third grade of learning the saxophone, I honestly was kind of lukewarm on it, because it was difficult. It was a practice. It was something I had to put effort into. But I also did enjoy the idea of making sound and just that freeing even if it's just like, and it sounds like a duck getting attacked by a tractor. It was like something that I was creating. It was something that I was doing. And like, yeah. And I've always been, I can't like sit still. I'm always moving a foot or a leg, or like I'm a very like subtly moving anxious person.
Gotcha.
Despite
Same.
how most people
you're a kinesthetic
me.
person. It just comes out for you through movement. Through music. I get it.
Yeah, and so like I would practice on my grandmother's porch these terrible saxophone squawks, but I'd be like walking in a circle, and like just like honk 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 honk, and then if she'd ask me something, I'd tell a story and just be walking in a circle and moving with it, and so like. I just kind of did it because I did it, and like my friend played the saxophone, so like we were in the same area during that part of school, and so it was just something I did. But then come middle school is where I really started to like acknowledge and identify that this is something innately inside me that I need to pursue more. And that's when I started doing the jazz bands and like concert bands and marching bands and all the like anything that was music related that I could do in school that got me out of other classes, because I filled up the time with this, was what I wanted. And I wanted nothing more than to make these sounds, and I ended up spending all my time just making sound and creating it and engaging in it in certain ways. And at that point, I started learning guitar in middle school, which superseded the saxophone almost immediately. Became my like new girlfriend at that point. And at that point, the guitar really is where I think it started opening up for me as this like true creative outlet. Because with the saxophone, it's a melody instrument. You can only play one note at a time for the most part. You can make some weird like or harmonics on it where you play like two notes at once by like doing certain techniques, but you can't like strum a chord. Whereas the guitar and the piano, you have all of these notes at your disposal. For a piano, it's as many as your 10 fingers can muster, and for the guitar, it's as many as your 4 fingers or 5 if you have a long thumb can make happen here. So you have a much wider range of things to work with to create, and I automatically went to that. Also, at the time, I was like 13. The guitar is way cooler than saxophone when you're 13. You know, I wanted to learn like Nirvana and AC/DC and like all this stuff.
I like how you're bringing in a little bit of reality, like, you know, you're bringing in a little, because I'm all for like all the creative stuff you're talking about. But the truth is, right, like in that mindset, I get you.
Yeah, well, and that's not to sidetrack the story of how I got to where I'm at, but a part of what makes what I offer, I think, special is that is my entire mindset. With your lessons, I'm not going to hit you on the wrist with a ruler and be like, you used the wrong finger to learn that piano part. It's like, did you do it? Was it comfortable? No? All right, well then we need to figure out how that's going to actually work so you can continue playing it right, so you can enjoy it. You don't want to learn Chopin? I don't care. Do you want to learn Adele? Cool. Let's figure out how to play Adele so that you have these skills now. And when you are at a point where you're like, you know what? I want to learn how to play Beethoven's Ninth. Well, then we will tackle that one bit at a time, because now you want to do it. I never learned a darn thing that I didn't want to. Despite all the schooling I've gone through and all the lessons I've taken, if I didn't see the practical point, gone. Not in here at all.
Oh, yeah.
I would get through it, and then it's done. And that is no way to do something.
No, and that's public school education, right? Where 90% of us don't, well, probably more than that. 100% of us probably don't remember anything we learned in 10th grade, right? If it wasn't relevant, aside from like the social things that we learned. I can tell you exactly all the things that happened in that school year in terms of like related to like social settings, but I have no recollection of what I was doing in school.
Right. Like, I don't know what math class I took in 10th grade.
No.
It sucked. That's all I know. And I don't even remember it. I just know it sucked.
Exactly.
Because I hate math. But,
you remember how it made you feel, right? That very famous Maya Angelou quote. Yeah.
Yes, I remember how it made me feel. Exactly. That's extremely appropriate.
Yeah.
But to not continue that sidetrack, because that'll go on a giant tangent. At that point, middle school, Middle school through high school, all I was doing was playing music. I filled my schedule with, obviously I had to do like math and English and all that stuff, but any opportunity I had to fill my school schedule with music, I did. And then that's when I also started forming bands after school, like my rock bands and stuff, and like punk things. And so from pretty much 14 on, I was doing music all day, forever. That was just what I did. If I wasn't like running around jumping off things with umbrellas with Dan, because we were fools. But even Dan and I were in a we had a couple bands in high school. All of them terrible, god awful. No, so glad that MySpace died.
I don't even think he needs to be here to defend it. I think he would be in agreement because I've heard some things.
Oh yeah, there was a ska band with a bunch of our friends that we were in, and Dan had the school trombone that he rented because he was playing it in jazz band, and we were just like dancing around in a garage playing, and Dan was doing some funny move, and then the whole thing just came apart and broke in half. And he didn't own it. It was the school's. He was renting it, so then he had to come back in and be like, ska band practice.
Oh,
but
Malanta.
But it was just those kind of things.
Sounds right.
Yeah, like, and even that, like that moment, yeah, the trombone got damaged, but that is the innate sense of humanity. Like you were so into it, you're jamming so hard, and then it made you feel so good that something literally broke. Like something got broken because you enjoyed it so much.
You were engaged. That's a good tell of being engaged.
Yeah, and so that was kind of the vibe and the mentality for me. Really for the rest of existence. I'm 30 now, and that was when we were like 14. It hasn't stopped for me in that regard. Like I've always, the only thing I spend my time doing for the most part is music based. Like I've always been in bands. I've always done my solo stuff. I've been getting into like commission work and like writing songs for like intros and outros for podcasts and shows and stuff like that, theme music, just random stuff. Any version of creation that I can get into. And so moving from high school into college, I was like, well, and no 18-year-old generally knows what the hell they want in life, and if they think they do, they're probably wrong.
Truth. Truth. 1,000
so
times.
at that point, I just went into music education as a major at Westchester University in PA, and I did that for like I think about a year and a half, and that was like 2009 to 2010. And at that point, I had a friend, now one of my best friends in the world, Chelsea, came. She transferred in from a school called Kutztown, and she was doing a program that was a music therapy program. That it was a weird. It actually doesn't exist anymore. They stopped doing it a couple years back. But what it was a split program between two schools. So I did all of my core classes and gen eds at Westchester, and all of my like serious music school classes there, and like I got a bachelor's of music from them, so all of my hardcore music studying was there. But then I also took probably 2 or 3 classes a semester at a school called Immaculata University, which had still has a very good music therapy program.
That's awesome.
And what we did was you get all your music and gen eds from Westchester, and then you get all of your music therapy classes and credits from IU, and they would smush them together. So I got a bachelor's of music with a study in music therapy. And
very cool.
That whole process, in a long and short few sentences, was Chelsea came around, told me this existed, and she was doing it. I immediately went and met Dr. Anthony Meadows at Immaculata, who was the head of the department at the time. He's down in Shenandoah in Virginia, actually, which was funny. He was not far from me when I moved.
Right,
but yeah, serendipitous in a way. But he just from that conversation with him, and really it was him asking me a lot of questions about what I thought music was and what I thought it could do, because like we were both feeling each other out, seeing if it's going to be right, and I had no idea what any of it was. But I guess I said some right things, and I was interested beyond belief. So at that point, from that day on, I was like, I don't want to stand in front of kids in a high school and teach concert band. I want to do this. This is what I want. I didn't know there was that option ever. It was pretty new to me. And music therapy is a pretty new field, only a couple decades old, really. It started around the 60s. After World War II, it really started getting prominence. And even those first couple years were, they used a lot of iffy techniques. We can go down one
like
day.
most practices,
But,
that's what happens.
It's grown a lot, but it is still a baby, and not many people know about it. And especially when I was, that was like 2010, I think, is when I switched. And even like going to my parents and being like, I'm switching majors. I printed out like documents and like PowerPoints on like what this was and why it's a viable option, so that I could be like, don't worry, I'm not going to spend all this money on school and then be destitute.
Right.
I'm not going to make a lot of money ever in my life, but I'll survive.
And you'll like what you're doing. At that point,
that was the only goal. Exactly. It's funny. Like I remember watching School of Rock with Jack Black when it came out, and I think my parents were watching it with us, my sister and I, someone. But my dad and I were having a discussion, and I was just like, that'd be the best job in the world, just like rocking out with kids and teaching them how to have fun with music. And my dad was like, yeah, what a world that would be if that's a real job. And then years later, lo and behold, you could actually do that.
Yeah.
We were just from a small town in the woods in New Jersey where that didn't reach us yet. We didn't know that was a thing. And so learning about it was just like, I can do this. And so I finished up school, did an internship at a outpatient psychiatric hospital in North Philly. And from there, it's just been trying a bunch of places. I mean, I've in the last decade, I've had a few different jobs in a few different states and various settings. And like I said earlier, I've worked with everyone from 18 months to 103 with every scenario you can imagine. It's been fantastic. I don't think there could have been a better decision. And so that all of that, like it's all like building blocks leading up to where I'm at, of like experiences and learning what there is out there that I had no clue existed, and what makes me feel good. Finding out what, like, am I going to be miserable doing this? Do I want to do this? What do I actually want? And that's a question I very regularly asked before that in life. And I think any therapist will probably have this to say, but like, you often, at least for me, put others and their well-being far ahead of your own. So it's very rarely like what's good for me. And then if I make that decision of what's good for me, it feels very selfish and hurtful to whoever it affects.
Oh yeah.
But that's not healthy.
You're hitting the nail right on the head. It's very funny, Andy, all these years that I've known you, and like I'm very happy that we get to do this, because I see so many parallels to my experiences growing up. Just like put movement in there. And all of the ways that you think, right? And Dan is like, this is why Dan and I are still together, because he's starting to see it for himself too, right? Like the way that you are defining your life, right? Your life is such a good example of what I would believe too is the reason why we are here, right? You are here to go through all of this journey and this learning about yourself and building that awareness and dealing with all that shit that gets thrown at you, because it's a way for you to uncover what makes you happy, what makes you feel like you're here, what makes you feel alive, right? Not to be super corny, but that's the truth of it. And then being able to actually walk that path. And it is really, really hard. And walking that path is a struggle, because everybody else and everything else is going to tell you you're not supposed to do that, because our society is not built that way. I went through, and I had no idea. I'm still figuring out what the hell. I'm so happy that music therapy was a thing that found you.
Being an adult is a giant lie.
Oh yeah, it is.
It's
It's
just
a lot
making
of figuring
everything
it
up.
out.
No one knew what they were doing.
Right. Still to this day, when you realize that your parents didn't know what they were doing too, that's a fun one. Have fun with that. But I'm still figuring out, and I'm finding I do a lot of, like you were saying, right, taking on these different projects and things that feel right, that make you feel good. I'm still, the field of dance science and like the movement sciences merging all together into a thing that feels right for me, I don't think exists yet. Right, into the ways that I kind of want it to.
No.
So that's why I started my first business, is because I made them do that. Right, I make them do that, and it's a struggle, but it's worth it because you live life the way that you see fit, the way that feels right for you. Right, going all the way back to the beginning of our episode. And you see the value
in it.
Yes, yeah, going all the way back to the beginning. Right, those vibrations. You found the vibration that fits for your personal, like, internal tuning fork, and so many people.
You're hitting that wave in the same way.
Yeah. So it's funny because Dan was like teasing me. On Friday I just accepted a new project. So on Friday I had to wake up super early. And I spent the whole day out and was like running around, and I spent the entire day in like different modalities of like dance settings and movement settings. And I got home and I was exhausted, but like I was riding that. Like I was super excited. I was like, this is the greatest day ever.
Feels good.
I was exhausted, but I was like riding that emotional high, right, from doing something that you feel really passionate about. I remember in one of our first episodes, I had said, your life is a success if at any point during it you find what helps you feel that way, right? Like you find what makes you feel fulfilled. You find what makes you feel good about yourself and makes you feel connected to something greater than, like, bigger than you. And I still very firmly believe that that's true. And I think it's amazing that you are able to find it and that you're sticking to it and you're following through with it. So I'm sure you've learned a whole bunch of things, but if there's anything that you've learned in this journey for yourself that you think is, potentially applicable, or just something that would be valuable to somebody else to hear, and there might not be one thing, so this might be a hard question, but what would be something that you found that you've like learned about yourself, or you've learned about the greater scape of the world through this process you've gone through so far?
Well, I think the most broad stroke of that is that I've learned for me is, especially from 15 years ago to now, is just being open and accepting to experience and new things and things that make you uncomfortable. In that exploration of the self, that again, that's super hard to do, especially on your own. But all that whole journey from third grade to where I'm at now that we just went through, all of that in its own innate way is me stumbling through the dark, going, where's the wall? And oh, that wall feels kind of weird. I don't like that. Let's go to this one. And eventually you find the wall with the lamp on it and you switch it on, and it's like, oh, well, I didn't need any of that crap over there. I'm going this way.
It's such a beautiful analogy. It's so spot on too.
It's literally how I see it. It's just you don't know what you don't know, and the only way to know what you don't know is to put yourself in that place, to be open to learning and have experiences and have situations where you're going to be like, IDK, sorry. But you still got to do it. Other than like that, in a very blunt way, I'm very sink or swim in everything in life. You either do or you don't. Like Yoda. Like, all right, things suck. Are you gonna die? No. So you keep going. And how do you do that? How's that gonna be good?
Yeah.
And so
perspective is a wonderful thing.
Idea, 100%, and hard to keep in place, especially through those growth periods. But that broad stroke of just being open to growth and not being closed off to learning something new or trying something new just for the hell of it. That's been a huge one for me. Also, learning to trick yourself, I wrote down.
Ooh, fun.
As a thing. Like, yeah. So I tend to have a very kind of pessimistic and dark outlook on a lot of things.
Same.
Despite being like a therapist.
That's usually it. Coming back to what you were saying before, right? The when you're somebody who sees yourself as being in a role where you feel responsible for like helping other people, right? That's like that was the first thing that when I started therapy that I had to like deal with. When
Curb
you
it.
take right, when you take on those roles, you almost kind of start to realize like, oh, I'm the person who definitely you deal with a lot of it and you want to help other people deal with it because you've gone through
Right.
the very shitty parts of it. So it's a lot to take on. It's a lot to take on.
Yeah, and difficult not to become just like cynical and jaded all the time, which I'm not good at. Like
Same.
I can be the king of like the end of the world, but I'll laugh while I say it. So defense mechanisms all
Yes,
day.
humor
But
is the greatest
like,
mechanism ever that we were ever able
yeah,
to find to be able to deal with all of it.
yeah. But even like with me, with myself, with like organizing my thoughts and my responsibilities, it's like it's a game against my brain. It is me try against myself to get things done so that things will happen in a way that me, not my brain, wants it to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and so learning those tricks, how you're gonna like, all right, if I set a deadline, I know that deadline exists, but I know I'm me and I'm going to push it to the very end. And then I'm going to push it past that because I know I can pull that off because whatever reason,
Yep.
some magic, we'll call it Irish luck.
Yeah.
But like, I know that is not the way to go about it. So how do you set things up so that you can reach that goal without pushing that envelope so far that it falls off the table, but still allowing yourself the freedom to push the envelope? It's a very tightrope act, and a lot of mess ups happen in figuring out how to function. But I know for me as a person, I am not a typical functioning human being. Like I don't exist as many other people do, and the things I do in the order I do them and the way I go about things, many people will be like, "What?" But then at the end of the week, there's all this stuff that got accomplished and all these things that happened, and it's just about figuring out the best way that you work and exist and will do things. And that's coupled with that idea we were talking about of actually enjoying what you do and finding that thing that really being brave enough to open yourself to finding out these things that you want to do and are passionate about. Because not honestly, I would say most people don't like. I got lucky. I happened to have music exist in my life, and then I latched onto it, and it was just in here. Many people don't have that opportunity all the time, and so go through most of life not like that Timmy Turner thing. Like they don't get the pink hat; they're just the gray blob for a long time, and don't know that there's a pink hat to be had. Um, so tricking yourself into all of these scenarios that you wouldn't otherwise be in and all these processes, like I never used like Google Calendar and like Asana and Evernote and all these like task management things until my last job, but that was where I truly learned how to like hack my own brain into like getting things organized and getting things done and prioritizing and making these decisions based off of not just like blowing in the wind, which was like I always make the joke like I've fallen ass backwards into so many good scenarios that I didn't intend on and never would have guessed on in a million years. I didn't set a course for them. I just did my thing and they happened. Now some could say that me doing my thing did set that up and laid the tracks for it, but it doesn't feel like that and it was not purposeful. Almost everything I did until the last like couple years was not purposeful. Things just happened in life and I reacted. And so taking control of what you're doing once you learn how you tick and how to hack your own brain, being able to take control of that and make it your own is, I think, one of the most mentally liberating and helpful things. Now it's hard, obviously, like, you've started your own thing. I've got my own thing starting up here. Like that's a grind. It's a slow uphill battle. And there's going to be a lot of barriers and a lot of things that happen, but that still is all the growth. That is me walking in a circle on the porch playing the saxophone, babbling to my grandmother. It's all the process. It's all the learning experience, and again, it's also intertwined, this whole answer, but that
really,
that comes
yeah.
back.
No, I'm
Yeah,
with you though. It is. It's so. It's so. My brain is super almost like really trying to understand the weird amount of parallels we have in our lives. But
well, that's why we both love Dan.
that's probably true, honestly. The on one side of that spectrum, it's the that openness, right? That exists. That
Yeah.
right. Okay, so now I'm gonna get into like all of these like spiritual but not spiritual things for a moment. So bear with me. But um, if we come back to those vibrations, right? If you reject those vibrations, if you don't have that openness to being willing to receiving them, even if you're not like consciously aware of it, subconsciously
Right.
allowing all of that to kind of make its way to you, to give you those opportunities, to give you those. And sometimes it's you, sometimes it's like, the environments around you, right? The spaces that you're in. If you don't have that, then you're never going to get to the point where you get to make the choices that make a difference, right? Because a lot of them, like you're saying, right, we either walk our path on a spectrum of saying, I'm going to let things come to me, or, and I'm not going to do anything, right? Which is, good and bad for its own reasons. Or we're on the far side of that is where I'm not going to let anything come to me and I'm going to do everything for me, right? I'm going to choose everything and not see what happens. Like, I'm not going to wait to be open to anything. I'm going to make everything happen. And I've been reading recently, it's a little bit about, like being the receiver versus being like the go-getter, right? Like being on those two spectrums, and they have positives and negatives to both sides, and anyone can span from any given moment any part of that spectrum. But when you know how to kind of like move yourself at given points and when's the appropriate time to move yourself, it's very, very interesting to see where you end up, right? Like what you're saying right now, right? Having the ability to look back and say, this stuff kind of happened. I was the same. Literally, shit happened to me. Like, I didn't make any of that. Like, the only thing that I decided on was dance, right? I knew what I didn't want. That was the only thing I knew, right? I knew what I didn't want. I had no idea what I wanted. And stuff just happened to me. And then in those moments, you make the decision, right? You choose to make the decision. And like you're saying, it's a really hard place to be, because not only is somebody trying to influence whether you should be open or not for your entire life, especially during your adolescence when everybody else is trying to mold you into something. Yeah. Everyone's trying to influence your points when you get to make those decisions. And exactly like what you had mentioned before, those are the scary parts, like those areas of being vulnerable, especially when you start to do it for yourself. It's not as scary when we're in those settings where other things are influencing and you're allowing all of that to make your decisions, and you run on that autopilot influenced by your environment, right? You don't feel like you're not responsible for it, right? And then we fall into, people blaming the world for their problems. But when you sit on the other side of that and you say, I'm going to stand here in this pile of shit that is my life right now, and I'm the person who has to make the decision, there's nobody else that I can blame. That's the uncomfortable stuff that no one wants to do. So this is like a super side note, but I'm going to give you a ton of props and respect, because even if you don't speak to it, you've made a lot of those decisions to be here. And I can say this from my end, right? I remember growing up and everyone telling me, you're not going to make any money if you go into dance. You're never going to be successful. You're like, right? The arts are very critical in and of themselves. And then you're young on top of that, and it's just everything else going on.
They're not wrong.
Right. They're not wrong. But, they don't
but
know.
It can be done.
Right. They don't know what they're talking about. They know their very small understanding of it.
Yeah, that's stopping it before it has the opportunity to even happen.
And it is not fun to be in that position and be like, it's not like an easy thing where you just go, oh, it's fine, I'm going to do it anyway. It's like you say that, right? And I still do this to this day. I'll say, oh, it's fine, I'm going to do it anyway. And then on the inside, all of those voices, like those scary monsters that usually run under the radar, start to go, well, blah, 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 blah. Do you watch Big Mouth?
Right.
By any chance?
No, I've actually never seen it. No.
I just watched the last season, and they actually talk a lot about like anxiety and depression. Really super inappropriate, totally my humor, but that it's a good connection that was in my brain. It's not fun to be that person and be in that position and have to continue to move forward anyway. So I give you so much
Right.
props because you wouldn't be where you are now being able to help other people if you didn't do that. So it's something that it's not an easy it's a gladiator thing. It's a gladiator thing hands down. You have to put on all of your armor and protect yourself and walk through, the middle of combat and just deal with it to get to the other side. And I see that as being somebody who also is I'm a servant person. That's my personality
Mm.
for all the good and the bad of it. I would very happily put on the armor and walk myself into those mental, emotional not I can't do it physically because I'm not that kind of person. But the mental emotional stuff I will happily walk into so that other people don't have to and then help them
Right.
kind of follow the pathway to do it. So I have a lot of respect for your ability to have gone through that to get to where you are now and for your willingness to keep doing it enough to work on your project yourself. So I want to get into that as we wrap up a little bit today. How can people work with you? Tell you I know you said you have a performance coming up, like a charitable event that you're doing.
Yes.
How can people connect with you and find you, like all that? We're going to drop all of this guys in the show notes as well, but just to have you talk about all of it.
Sure. So if you want to contact me directly, and for anyone that is listening or watching, if you have questions or and just want to talk more about this stuff, I'm an open book. Please just reach out. You can email me at cavanaghmusiccompany@gmail.com. I've got a Facebook, same thing, facebook.com/Kavanagh Music Company. Instagram, Kavanagh Music Company. You can also, if anyone's interested in listening to my solo music, I've got a couple albums out on Spotify and a few things on Bandcamp that aren't on all the streaming platforms, but that's just andrewkavanagh.bandcamp.com. Most importantly, out of all of this, though, next Saturday, actually Friday and Saturday, it's a 2-day festival I'm a part of called Elephants for Autism. And I got some notes here so I don't say the wrong things, but the 2-day festival is raising funds for a community. I grew up in South Jersey. For those who are listening, I don't think I mentioned that earlier in part of all my travels. But I grew up in a small town in South Jersey with Brittany's fiance, and so I was in a band down there for a long time called Rocklanders, and I got to know a lot of promoters and a lot of people in the music scene down there. And a great guy named Jerry Ryan has been putting on 10 years now. This is the 10th anniversary of Elephants for Autism Online Festival. It's been in person other years, but obviously with COVID, it's online. And what they're doing is they're raising funds for a organization called Sprouting Connections down in South Jersey, who focuses on providing education and support to families, communities, and individuals with autism or special needs down in the South Jersey area. Particularly, I think they work towards the shore area. And last year, they raised about $6,500 in donations, and they're hoping to up that to $75 this year. And all of it goes directly to Sprouting Connections. There is no band payout. There is no, thankfully for Jerry and for the organization, the online ones. I just did a podcast actually where I was a special guest with him for someone else to promote this last week. And we were talking about how the online forum actually kind of helps the fundraiser aspect because there's no overhead. He doesn't have to pay sound guys or the venue or a lighting guy or any of that stuff. So 100% of this and last year's is all going directly to Sprouting Connections, which is awesome.
That's amazing.
And maybe for events in the future, a wise way to go about it on top of doing live gigs. But that is happening next Friday and Saturday, and I'll be performing. I'll drop a link to the live stream for you to put in all this. But I'll be performing at 5:30 on Saturday for that. And I've got a lot of friends actually that are playing that as well. So it'll be a good time. It's going like all day and all night, Friday and Saturday. There's like hundreds of performers, I think.
Wow.
And it's all online, so you can watch from home. And it's a great cause. They're working towards building a farm, actually, a working farm for folks with disabilities to have they run it. They do everything for it. So they'll be learning skills. They'll be in the community. They'll be active, because a big issue, especially in really just everywhere. It doesn't, not even just in South Jersey, but once you hit 21, as someone with special needs, you're kind of just thrown to the wind. There aren't as many resources for folks that are past that age, and so a lot of folks, when they age out of these programs, be it through the school system or the counties or the state or anything that's funded by the people, they phase out and they can't keep them legally anymore. And so at that point, it's like, well, what are they gonna do? Like they're just dropped out into nothing. And so really what they're hoping to do with this is give more opportunity for folks with special needs at that point, 21 and older for the most part. Obviously, if they're younger and they want to be involved, they will be. But specifically for those folks that have no other resources now, to have a vocation, to have a voice and be a part of a community, and not just wither away somewhere in the darkness because all of a sudden there's nothing for them to do. Right. So it's a beautiful. Awesome cause. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Very worth your while. I've also got donation links for you guys.
Good. That's beautiful. I've seen firsthand what those. I can't remember the name of the place off the top of my head, but my father and I would go so my dad was a part. This is relative to music, but my dad was a part of a band called like the Watering Can Band for years. They were like a band that like all retired people from Brooklyn who like lived in New Jersey, they all played. And there's there's a horse farm that works specifically with people who are special needs, and they have a lot of programs. So we would go there every holiday and do like a holiday show for them. So I've seen firsthand what these types of programs can do for people, and like the beautiful experiences that they create for people. This is such a good cause. I'm super excited to tune into it now as well. So we will share all of the links for all of everything that Andy has mentioned, so that you guys can dive in. I'm really excited now with everything you're doing with your company, to be able to continue to watch you grow it and see the impact you're going to make, because now I understand more of what's going on with all of it. So, and if you ever need anything, Maria and I actually might be getting on a call with you like post recording episodes, and actually have you work with us to do an intro song for us, because that would be amazing.
I'm happy to
didn't even know that was a thing. That would be amazing. But yeah, thank you for joining us and giving, like, I've learned a whole ton today. I know that I hope this episode can make maybe somebody realize, like, hey, music therapy is something I should try for myself, because I'm honestly thinking that as well.
Well, hey, for all you listeners out there, if you're at least in my time zone, and if you're not, we can do virtual.
Yeah, that's amazing. Guys, look into Andy and all the work that he does. Outside of like
shameless plug.
It's very we're plugging for days, because on this, like, we've talked about everything that we want to do on this podcast, literally in our conversation today, right? Help people feel like they're not alone, help people have resources and tools to be able to like care for themselves. And the work that you do is literally founded in all of that. So I think it's a great thing for people to be able to connect to. So we will drop all of that in the show notes, and Maria's going to have a million follow-up questions, so we're probably going to have you on again.
Yeah.
And we would love for you to be able to join us next week when we talk about concerts, because that was how I knew you at first, right? I experienced you at like concert events and all of these fun things. So we can definitely talk about that in the future as well. But thank you so much for spending time with me today. It was so wonderful to get to see you from like this perspective, because now we're gonna have so many things that we can talk about going forward, and Dan's gonna be very confused. It's gonna be wonderful.
We're gonna be talking in circles. He's just gonna be like, I should have been on that podcast. Now I don't know.
Yeah. Honestly, it's funny because he was here and he left for work, but I feel like we were like talking about something very in depth at that point, so I feel like he was probably like, I don't want to just pop
can't jump ship mentally.
Yeah, he was like, I don't want to just pop my head in, and then I know he was very sad that he had to leave for work, but I'm sure that he will follow up with you. We'll talk about. I wanted to talk one thing. Wedding. So Andy, like, side note, Andy Guys is going to be playing at my wedding with Dan, because we love him, and there's no one else that you guys can understand from listening to this episode. There's no one else that I would trust more to put an acoustic moment of our wedding in the hands of. But we'll talk about that off air. So, so thanks again for joining us, guys. We will talk to you next week. We're going to be talking concerts and post-COVID concerts and pre-COVID concerts and all things live music. And we will talk to you guys on the next episode.